Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. All right. Hello and welcome, everybody, to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. We want to talk about something that's very close to our heart, but it's misunderstood, and we want to change that a little bit. So we want to talk about why strategy feels slow. And you guys won't believe this, but how this conversation got started was Jay is an avid TikToker. No, he doesn't do the dances, although there is, I think, a clip of you at a holiday party doing a really embarrassing dance, and you twerked earlier this year. But we'll
Yes.
just leave that for another. If you guys
Oh,
want any of the
goodness.
videos, just email
Stop.
me. But actually, bummer, there's actually no evidence of your twerking.
So it never happened.
We'll say it was like Lexi and Ella taught you or something like
Oh,
that. But
goodness.
no, so it was you actually, it's funny, you're on TikTok and I'm on Reddit, and so we share these like funky channels. There's always some weird rabbit hole stuff in there. However, tell them about the tree.
Yeah, so I don't know how I got down the tree talk. Is that the cool way of saying it? I'm such a dork. Anyways, I don't know why this morning, but I think out of the 20, 30 videos I watched, I think 4 or 5 of them were about tree maintenance, and not even in Arizona due to the weather craziness we've had the last week or so. Um, but I thought it was really interesting, and it got me thinking about this topic where, this gentleman had like 5 or so different tree arborist type companies come out. He was really worried that he had this massive branch off a large tree that was kind of hanging over his house, and he was worried that bad weather happened, that would fall on his roof. And so he was just looking to have someone come there and just trim or cut that branch. And he basically recorded for some reason all of his engagements with these various companies, and they wanted to charge him like everything from 15 to $30,000. It was again a pretty big branch. I guess because liability by the roof, that was the issue. And I was really impressed with the last firm that he hired. They actually were probably one of the more expensive ones that he met with. But it was really interesting where the gentleman came out and he did a pretty deep diagnostic of the tree, and he did find in this one area opposite of where that huge branch was, some like leaking. And the homeowner thought it was just, tree sap or something. And the guy showed him that actually it was bacteria with the tree. And that if they did cut down that huge branch or trimmed it, it actually could make that problem worse. And then very likely the whole tree could fall on his house. And so the guy took his time and explained it to the homeowner, and educated him around, a better way to do this. And I just found it to be really impressive because it made me think about, like to your point about how often companies feel that, a strategic process, and having a consultant coming in and helping does feel like it's going to be slow, but it's such a smarter way to go to identify possibly bigger problems out there.
Yeah, well, part of it is the culture we're in now, which is great in most respects, that we want it now, we get it now. There's this instant delivery, instant gratification. It's very cool in a lot of ways. It's helped a lot of people get out of their homes or get food or a bajillion other things. But where we miss is that we don't think there's anything else. It's like, okay, this is an issue in a silo. And that's where you and I chatted about having external eyeballs is a whole nother level of
Hmm.
awareness. And that is a pain point, I think, for a lot of strategic agencies. And if you're not used to working with them, it can feel like, oh, they're really getting into it. And there's a reason why. And part of that is the tree falling on the house. And, it seems excessive, that example, but really there are several other instances in which we've had conversations with clients about, absolutely we could solve that problem, but then here are the other risks that you run into with just this one solution. And I don't know, Jay, like, are there any instances of some clients where you thought, wow, this really opened up their eyes to the future of their opportunities by being very strategic, or any that kind of like, oh man, this was a lot, and we now have eyes wide open.
I mean, I've got unfortunately dozens, if not hundreds, but I think the thing that I've seen as a common thread throughout, and again, we've even been that had that challenge ourselves. It's like you know what you know, and when you're inside of the thick of things, there's all these bumpers or boundaries you put in your mind regarding what you can and cannot do. And so I think from what I've seen, part of I think the biggest value that I've noticed that a lot of our clients have by hiring a firm like us is that kind of outside perspective. We don't have those, the day-to-day bias. And again, I think when we talk with our clients, we often will hear like, we can't do this, we can't do that. And when we ask the question why, it's just because, well, we've either tried it before and it didn't work, or we're not going to be allowed to do it. And I just think that, from our point of view, we don't all have all of that, that history in our head, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. But I think in this case, it's a good thing, because we don't know like, oh, two CMOs ago, tried this and it didn't work. But often the problem isn't the tactic, it's often the strategy. And so I think what we do a lot of times for our clients is we open up their eyes to the possibilities of it's broken because of X, and here's how you solve X, and here's the value it's going to bring to your business. And so, yeah, it might add a little bit of time to understand and properly diagnose the issue, or the opportunity. But I think that's where I think our clients find significant value, because we don't have to worry in theory as much about, maybe stepping on someone's toes or hurting their feelings, as long as we're coming at it from a very strategic data-based recommendation point of view. And that's why I think what's good about us is that we're not like a shiny object. Here's some cool things you guys can try. We take our time to do the due diligence and to come back and say, based upon what we found, here is why you're having the issue or missing the opportunity.
Yeah, and we've experienced this like internally as well, where being strategic, and again, you and I have talked about how this word has so much, it's misappropriated or
Yes.
misused and misunderstood, all the above. It's also where you run into trouble with, if you want a yes person, you're going to get a yes person. I have this problem, solve it. Okay, they solve it. Now, well, wait, that created another problem. Okay, we'll solve that problem. And they just chase problems. But when you have a strategic view, you're able to anticipate potential issues. You can't mitigate all of them, but you can see with enough experience in the past, we've seen this happen this way. And so if you want to do X, you might also want to consider in the future Y and Z could occur. How would you like to prepare for that, if at all? And I think that's where we really enjoy the work, is we're not just a yes shop, but it also is helping educate our clients on things that they didn't know about. And that's why I think part of this topic is that it feels slow, is because you're learning as you're going in many instances. There are things you didn't know. And honestly, there are so many changes that
Hmm.
you almost need an external partner if you don't have full-time resources to stay on top of. As Ryan, our director of service operations, puts it, the sand is shifting literally under our feet with every step we take. And AI has done that. And so it's going to feel harder to be strategic if you don't keep up with now.
Yeah, and I think, obviously we don't want to make this feel like it's a sales pitch, but obviously we love this part of it. But I think, the one aspect I would love as a takeaway for people to think about is, we have some clients that have some very strategic leadership in place. And often we'll have conversation with them, typically offline, and I'm not going to name the companies, but they struggle where they might be very similar mindset or process strategy driven like we are. but they work with other team members who just feel like, to your point, it's like, oh, one more audit, I can't handle it. Just get it done. We need more leads or whatever the desired outcome is. And I think for us, the part that I've really enjoyed over the years is way before even COVID, is just hearing the headaches that a lot of our clients have on dealing with those internal issues about strategy feeling slow. Is it help us realize there's a better way to present it. And so I think what I love about the way we do it now is it's more about like the playbook. It's very action oriented. And so rather than it being like this, hey, we're a McKinsey shop selling you a 520-page order that no one's going to freaking read. Instead, we talk about the value of going through a process and the clarity it's going to bring to you to really help ensure that every minute and every dollar you're investing is going to get a better chance of getting ROI. And that's why I love how the way we've really tightened up our process. Obviously, AI has definitely helped a ton there as well to kind of really have a challenger mindset. But I think again, it's like if you can explain the destination and just tell about what the journey is you have to go down the process to get there, I think often people will be much more comfortable with the extra, 2 to 4 weeks, whatever time frame it takes to complete the proper due diligence. And again, every single time we've done this for the, I don't know, 300 plus companies we worked with over the 15 years, um, people always are like, okay, that was really helpful. It was now we see the value of having to wait the extra few weeks. But to your point, it's like everyone, we're in this crazy climate for many years now where people are in this, I want the answer today. And we can give you the answer today, but we can't tell you 100% confidence it's going to be the right answer. So if you're comfortable, you've already had this problem for so many years. What's waiting an extra few weeks potentially to do it the right way?
Yeah, and I suspect too, a lot of it is, and I was just on a call with another agency owner talking about the Colby test you and I took all those
Oh,
years
I
ago,
love it.
where I was so high on the fact finder. Any of my fact finder people out there, give me a hallelujah. I am so high on the fact finder, and I think a lot of people are not. And that is where strategy really gets its legs, is you have to have data in order to make decisions. And coming up with that data, if you've never had, like you talked about audits and making, true, not assumptions anymore. You're not making assumptions. You want actual information. And that is what takes some time, is I'm needing to validate what you're saying, or just starting from scratch if you've never done this before. For example, like when we do ICPs or persona development, we are usually validating what we believe, but in order to be strategic, you need more information. You can't just go off of a gut or the people you've served in the past. You want some true market information, and that takes time. And in order to be strategic, part of that is in order to even develop the strategy. If you want a correct one, a good one, you have to give it some foundation, and that foundation comes from the fact finding, and that piece has exponentially increased
Hmm.
just even in the 10 years I've been here. I remember our strategy projects used to take months, and
Oh my
now we've
gosh.
really
Yeah.
consolidated. In fact, I think we could pump out like a mini strategy in like a couple days. And obviously, you're giving up a couple of things that you might
Hmm.
want to know, but you're moving faster. And so part of that is, how do we help you move faster? Again, this isn't a sales pitch at all, but the point is, you have to have some level of understanding, and that's and understanding what different pieces go into quote strategy. It's not just one block, it's lots of phases and pieces of it. And I think that's also not something that's maybe well known outside of the agency space or clients working with agencies, is how much goes into that. Like the tree, you really unpacked, that could turn into so many things. Like it's now an unhealthy tree, and now you have to look at all your other trees. Are those at risk of infection, and could
Yep.
that affect the wood of your house? And so it really has a lot of consequences to this one conversation. And that's where, having a good external partner who's like, oh, I've seen this before, I know how to help you figure this out. It can feel overwhelming once you start unpacking a really good strategy.
Exactly. And that's where I think, again, it's like what I've seen, because when you hire a external partner who's worked with, who's done this for hundreds of different companies, there's so much experience there, not only with what the process should be and what the desired outcomes will be, but also how to deal with potentially internal politics or internal challenges. Because again, the challenge often for agencies like us is our main contact will typically be like the chief marketing officer or maybe the head of sales, but they have bosses to report to who may have no understanding of marketing or sales. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And so I think again there when you're living day to day inside the organization, all of that I don't want to say nonsense, but all of those potential issues are floating around your head. They're going to not only bias you, but also prevent you from being innovative. And I think
That's the
for
noise
us,
versus signal, right?
exactly. And I think for us is we can say with confidence, hey, we have the problem that you believe you have. We've seen 10 other companies have the exact same concern, but we did want to share with you that when we went through our process, we actually found that 40% of them actually that wasn't really the problem because we were asking the wrong question. So that's where I think there is some value is bringing an external partner in who understands your business and your industry and your pain points. And then they can do the proper due diligence, make sure you're first asking the right question, and then has a process in place regarding what would be a confident solution to go and address the obstacle and or the opportunity. And that's where I think it's also good to your point, like we have for numerous clients, not just because they needed it done fast, but because we came up with some really good ideas and or the data wasn't there because they were entering some new opportunities. Even if you do have a pretty solid strategy, it still might have some areas they need to kind of test out. And so I think that's why the kind of rinse and repeat and refinement I think is so valuable because even if it sounds like it's going to be perfect, there's so many variables out of companies' controls. For example, like one of our manufacturing clients, we had an amazing plan for them that we launched and talked about in January or whenever that time frame was, and all of a sudden the tariff craziness started happening, and that was out of their control. No one thought that that was going to happen. So now all of a sudden they had problems with getting raw materials and all the other tariff constraints. And so obviously we had to pivot quickly and come up with some new strategies to help them so they don't, fall too far back against their, big 2025 goals. So that's where I think there is a lot of benefit of having a solid process, but also being agile.
Yeah, and we've talked before about how slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And, I think it was the one where the episode driving without a strategy, if you don't have a strategy, it's like driving blindfolded.
Hmm.
And part of that is strategy might feel slow in the beginning, but it really is the grease that later on makes the difference because you're not guessing or plugging holes. Like I can't not think of the Wile E. Coyote like on the
Oh
dam
gosh.
plugging all the holes in the rocks and he only has two fingers and then he starts using his toes. That's what it feels like when you have so many issues. But typically, that is indicative of you don't have a strategy help guide the signal versus noise conversations inside the business. And we've said it before too that strategy is adjustable. It does need to be changed based on like market conditions and certain other external factors or internal factors. But I think it only feels slow because you want this pain solved yesterday. And to your point, if you've had this pain this long, just invest a little bit of extra time to do it right. And
Hmm.
that's one of I think the difference. You could go and maybe a good example is if you want a better body, you could go get plastic surgery or you could go to the gym. Obviously, a healthy body is going to benefit from the long term pain of the gym. Your body isn't going to get healthier by going and getting plastic surgery, but the outcome that you want is a better looking body.
No more
So
dad bod.
no more dad bod. So that's where we appreciate the challenges people have with thinking about strategy in their business and how to implement and all that. So we get it, but we're here to also kind of tout that without it, a lot of other things can go wrong. A tree could fall in your house, for example.
That would suck.
It
Well, I think,
would.
to your point, not that I feel like we're like plugging ourselves a ton in this one, but yeah, this tied into our book. Again, it is interesting. I feel like a business therapist sometimes when we do some of the really complex projects for our clients, where in their mind they have 12 million different issues and different avenues they can go down. It just feels overwhelming. So all of a sudden now they feel paralyzed. And I think for us, because we've worked with so many companies that are similar to them, had to have similar problems, again, because we do specialize in that kind of that mid-market B2B space, we have found that almost always the problems fall in like one of the five buckets that we talked about in the book. And that, for some reason, seems to help reduce a ton of stress because we do a really good job identifying, okay, where do you have, bottlenecks or gaps in your business around why you need a strategy? Let's identify those things first, and let's prioritize what's going to really generate the most revenue in the most, quickest and most efficient way possible that won't completely disrupt your business. And then you kind of go down this path of prioritizing it. So that way you don't feel like you need to have a, 100-page plus strategy document, but it's very focused on the desired outcomes. I just feel like that's where I think it's hugely valuable having often an external source coming in, like we've been talking about, because they often can see this a lot clearer because they don't have the fear of all the internal politics at play.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is more of a conversation about external services and people in general is that they can be strategic, partly because of the experience that they've had. So earlier we mentioned you don't know what you don't know, and that's the value of having an expert in any way come into, your life, whether it's your car or a tree. There's always like a contractor experience that people can think of where, wow, if they had solved this one problem, I would have had so many other problems. I'm really glad I had someone who thought through the entire experience for me and was strategic in their recommendation of how to solve my problem. And so I think that's like our PSA, if you will, for today is, you know, it takes a little bit of time and patience, and there's good reason for that, um, because it's meant to save you time and pain down the road, you
Yeah, I
know?
love like, obviously after I've had those that listened to the a couple of shows ago about me with my accidents, Sarah, you gave me really good perspective on kind of like almost manifesting the positive energy of that. And I just started thinking about that as you were talking, where, I haven't really done it this way, but I think I'm going to start using that is when someone's just feeling so overwhelmed, mainly because I feel like doing a strategy would take too long and they're already feeling like they have to solve this problem yesterday. If we could help paint the picture of imagine what it will feel like when we've addressed your top 1 to 3 problems, and or opportunities, how does that feel? And I think if you can have some more positive outlook in things and stop letting all that negative energy preventing you from, fulfilling all these great possibilities, not only for your job and your role and your department, but also helping the company. I think it's just so exciting what you can get done. And again, I understand that there's variables out of everyone's control, but there's always solutions to in every problem that we've ever faced that you could solve, unless obviously the whole world ends, which obviously is not realistic. But I think it's super exciting where our positive mindset and experience we have of doing this for so many years allows us to uncover different ways to kind of pivot when it's appropriate.
Yeah, you mentioned like you almost get hyper focused or super myopic on your problems and then you can't see solutions. And I think I just told you this. I've been reading a book by Dr. Tara Stewart called The Source. And in it, she talks about the brain being overloaded by cortisol and it's no longer able to be flexible and agile. It's just so rigid because of this stress hormone. And I think a lot of people are in that space right now. And if you could just reflect for a second and say, am I feeling really overwhelmed by everything going on in the world, my personal life, business, whatever? There's a reason why I'm having a hard time thinking about the possibilities and not just the problems. And we've
Hmm.
all been guilty of this. There are plenty of experiences in our lives where we ruminate on this problem. And I think that's also another indicator that an external source could help you because they aren't bogged down by that energy. And they're like, this is my job, is to solve problems. And so I can be really innovative and creative because for them, it's what they do best. And for you, it's a problem, you know?
Love it.
Well,
Let's wrap this
Jay,
up then. This is a good one.
yeah, we hope you all enjoyed it. Obviously, like we're always open to help and we're just conversation people. You can reach us at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. And our book is out on Amazon, Revenue Rewired, the book. Excellent beach read. It's the best.
You're so funny. I love that. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.